Well, it's springtime and weather's really beautiful, and time to do a little bit of springtime maintenance on the 72 Lincoln Continental. I've been driving it year-round, but now that the weather's nice and before it gets too hot, I just wanted to go ahead and change the oil and give it a little bit of an inspection, a brake inspection, which I'll do a little bit later, just to make sure that this thing is all ready for the spring, that I won't have any problems. And this car is really easy to change oil on. It's really no different than any other car. And being as how the engine is so far forward from the firewall and everything is easy to get to. And so of course you want to jack the car up and get it on jack stands. And we're going to need a 3/4 inch socket wrench or box wrench, and basically an oil filter wrench. I've already taken a sample of the oil, so I've got that out of the way. And we'll get under here and see if I can get this loose by hand. It's got a couple of bad spots in it. So we'll just start the drain process. Just like on any other car. And just let all that old oil drain out. And while that's going on, I'll go ahead and clean up around here. Looks like I might have a slight leak around the oil pan drain plug. And then I'll get ready to take off the oil filter. Okay, now we're looking at the full flow spin-on oil filter on this big block 460 V8. And what you want to do is use your strap wrench to loosen that, and you want to try to get that right on the edge of where this transitions from the side to the bottom, because right on this edge here is the strongest part of the filter. If you go too far up and the filter happens to be really tight, you'll end up smashing the can and distorting it, making it that much more difficult to get off. And this car has got plenty of room under here, so if you can get it on the edge like this, that's usually the best way to do it. It's kind of hard to do with one hand, but you can kind of see how that is. It's almost not even on there all the way, but the jaws of that filter wrench are touching right on the edge of the filter. And we'll just go ahead and start to loosen it. Just kind of use a ratcheting action. I think that's loose enough to get off there by hand. Now the engine, I just got home actually, so this engine is still pretty warm. What you want to do is loosen it a little bit and let any oil start draining out that's in there. Looks like there isn't any, which is nice. So we'll just carry on with it. And you're just going to have to apply pressure while you're untightening it. You want to apply pressure toward the engine, and that way you're not going to end up losing the filter by surprise. You want to be able to control it and kind of feel where the threads are just starting to stop. And that's right about now, and you keep it vertical. And now that it's completely vertical, we'll go ahead and start draining what we can out of it. That way all this stuff is nice and controlled. There wasn't much in there. It's kind of a hit or miss how much oil you're going to have left in the filter. So we'll set that aside. And what you want to do is take the opportunity to get up in here and inspect the oil filter adapter, see what that looks like, and make sure that's all clean. and also make sure that the old gasket from the filter came off. And what I like to do is kind of go around here with a paper towel, make sure that gasket mating surface is all clean. If you do this each time you change the oil, it'll never really get dirty. Alright, now that's all clean and dry, and we're ready to go on with our new filter. And I gotta talk a little bit about filters. Actually, here's the old one. Get out here in the light. That's the brand I use on this car, from Baldwin. It's a V2F. And the inside of it looks pretty clean. Not any sludge or varnish or anything building up in there. And I'm going to end up going back in with the same filter. Same type of filter anyway. And I like to keep these cars as original as I possibly can. Even down to the battery, the old-fashioned batteries where you have the individual cells with the caps you can take off and add water. This is an exact reproduction battery made of hard rubber, just like you would find in 1972. And I'm going to have to replace it here pretty soon, so I'll make another video about that. But all the parts on this thing are all original. Original alternator, water pump. We even got the original PCV valve, which is metal. You can actually just clean these things out in carburetor cleaner, make sure they rattle when you shake them, and put them back in and not have to worry about it. So in keeping with the theme of keeping things original, as well as the technology, I've got an assortment of filters that I wanted to talk briefly about. This is the filter I'm going to end up using. Your typical spin-on full flow filter, here's an example also made by Baldwin. Looks just like this. Getting the light here. This is a cutaway view of what it looks like. You've got your pleated paper filter media in here. Their trade name is Microlight. That's the kind of media that it has. That's a typical full flow filter. It's high quality. The pipe in here is ribbed for extra strength against collapse. And on this one, the bypass valve is not in the bottom, but it's actually in the top there where the oil input is. Most of your filters on cars these days, if they're spin-on, are of this kind. And of course you've got the metal end caps as well too, and not the paper. Baldwin makes a very good filter. But in the old school days, you had filters made by Hastings and other filters made by K-Site. Some of you guys that have been around for a while and been working on cars for a while will recognize these names. This is a very old Hastings T115A filter, which is the filter for this car. By the way, all these filters are basically, they're all the same. It's equivalent to a Fran PH8A, typical Ford filter. And what makes this filter unique, this old Hastings filter, is it's a combination full flow and bypass. You can see just how deep that media is. It really scrubs the oil clean. Oil comes in here, these smaller holes, goes around here into these holes here, and it has to travel all through the entire depth of the media before it gets to the output, which is in the center section right here. And of course this media is so dense and thick that it really couldn't flow as much as the engine needs. So what they did is they have a much coarser filter that doesn't filter quite as nicely, probably maybe 100 microns or more on the end cap here. that actually serves as a basic filter and a bypass valve. You can actually press that in. It's under pressure. So when the filter starts to clog up with debris and the pressure differential across the input and output is enough, this is going to open up all the way and allow unfiltered oil to the engine, which generally is not a good idea, but it's better than not having any oil at all. These are very good filters because engines, if your engine's running right, shouldn't be generating a whole lot of large debris. So it's okay to have a relatively open filter like this, and then on a part-time basis do a complete scrubbing and cleaning of the oil. And Hastings called this filter the depth type spin-on. And K-Site has done the same thing. It's a very similar filter. Here's all the part numbers it replaces: the PH8A, Motorcraft FL1A. If we turn this guy around, you basically have the same concept there, where the oil must travel all throughout this media, the entire thickness of the media. It gets the oil extremely clean. It's got it has to spend a lot of time through here to in order to make it out the other end, and because of that it gets very clean as compared to a regular paper filter, which is very thin by comparison but can flow a lot more oil. As you see on the bottom, no need for the bypass back there. The only reason this filter has a bypass valve at all is just to prevent the engine from starving from oil if the filter actually clogs. Now this filter here is a true depth type filter. What they've done is, instead of having a fine mesh screen here to filter out a lot of the large particles, they don't have any kind of screen at all. It's just a hole. So this is basically a bypass filter. It's allowing a certain percentage of oil to come in here unfiltered through this larger hole, right back into the engine. You can actually see light through the other end. And then another percentage of the oil gets filtered through this depth type media. And the secret of it is, or the art of it is what's the difference? How much oil do you let go through this media, and how much do you let go through this opening here with no filtration? It's a fine, delicate balance that you have to achieve to get the cleanest oil that you possibly can. And of course, if the filter plugs up completely, this valve opens up and will completely bypass the depth type media. They don't really make these filters anymore because a lot of today's newer engines are much more sensitive to contamination, and they're also very expensive to make. And Baldwin, to my knowledge, was the last company that made filters of this type, and that is the Baldwin V2F. So basically we have two different kinds. They look like the same filter, but one is a full flow and one is a combination full flow bypass. And that's what this looks like. What you're seeing in there is spun cotton fibers. So just like on the older filters, oil comes in through here, goes in through these holes, and has to travel through the entire depth of the filter media in order to get properly cleaned. And one of the benefits of the cotton fibers is each one of these fibers swell up and make it that much harder for the oil to get through, cleaning the oil a lot better. And Baldwin has gone a step further, where they've put this coarser media through here, which is not a screen at all. It's actually kind of has the consistency of a Scotch-Brite pad or a Brillo pad, It's like a plastic, or maybe like a buff puff, like you would use on your face or something, that allows most of the oil to come in through here and get partially filtered, and then spend most of its time getting scrubbed really clean through the depth type filter. And most of the engine wear, or most of the particles in a healthy engine, are going to be around the say 20 micron range or so. You're not going to be generating, or you shouldn't be generating, a lot of the larger particles. So you're actually doing pretty good to gear your filters towards scrubbing the smaller particles at a slower pace than you are scrubbing everything at a fast pace, but not really able to scrub out the smaller particles on the first pass. So these full flow filters are good. The vast majority of filters in the market are full flow filters, but the oil has to go through there a lot more times to get clean than it does on a filter like this. A filter like this is actually capable of keeping the oil a lot cleaner than the standard full flow filters. And in fact, in a lot of the heavy duty diesel applications, like your 18-wheelers, they'll have two filters. They'll have a spin-on filter that's just like this, and then a bypass filter where this is completely plugged up there, where all it is just this depth type media. That kind of gives them the best of both worlds. And unfortunately, Baldwin doesn't make this filter anymore, but I happen to have a couple of cases of them actually, and that's what I'm going to use on the Lincoln Continental here. I've got a brand new one, and here's what the new ones look like. Really can't tell the difference between that and the standard filter. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take some oil and I'm going to go ahead and pre-charge the filter, pour some oil into the output of the filter, and let that soak in to the filter media. In other words, I'm going to fill it up to where all this cotton and everything is just completely saturated with oil, because I don't want to have a dry start on the engine. I do that with regular spin-ons anyway, but because of the nature of the filter I'm using, it's going to take a little bit more time for all this cotton to get saturated and swell up and start serving its function again. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll be right on back. Okay, now that we got our new filter all pre-charged with fresh oil, and we also have oil on the outside of the O-ring here, nice and shiny, and we've also cleaned the oil filter adapter on the block, so it's ready to get the new filter. And by the way, it's good to inspect the oil filter adapter and kind of look for any kind of buildup of sludge or anything like that around there, and we can see that for 41-year-old car, it's just absolutely spotless. No buildup of anything on there. This big old 460 is in great shape. So we'll go ahead and get our filter ready. And then we'll just get it started and spin it on. I like to kind of use my thumb to keep some pressure on it. Now it's started. And we'll just run it on down. Right about here is where it's contacting the block. And now what you want to do is just go ahead and tighten it by hand. Just like that. Just one hand's enough. You never want to use the oil filter wrench to tighten these. You never get it off of there again. Now's a good time to also inspect some things while you're under here. Here's the mechanical fuel pump. There's the input fuel line. That is the original 1972 fuel line, believe it or not. So you want to kind of feel it make sure that it's not getting hard and cracked. Obviously you want to look for any kind of leaks. See, this is still nice and supple. When they start to leak, they tend to leak around these stress points. There's a barb on the end of that hard fuel line that this hose fits over. It's right there. They'll usually start to crack right around those barbs. Same thing on the input to the fuel pump. And then of course you have a metal fuel line here. You want to check for leaks around the fittings and everything. And also the fuel pump itself, these older kind of fuel pumps, when they start to go bad, they'll start leaking around the crimp up there. It's basically a little diaphragm in there that operates a couple of check valves to squirt fuel in there, and it's driven off of an eccentric on the camshaft. So our freeze plugs look good, at least that freeze plug does. Front sway bar bushings are a little bit cracked, but it is under a lot of stress because I've got the front suspension in full rebound. And just want to check some of your bushings and upper and lower ball joints. You can see the ball joint seal up there is nice and full, as well as the one down here. These are the original ball joints on the car, original suspension. And part of the reason is you've got these Zerk fittings, grease fittings on the upper ball joint and lower ball joint. So you can actually, there's the Zerk fitting on the upper one. You can actually lubricate these things, believe it or not. Unlike today's new cars. And it looks like I've got a little bit of a leak starting to develop around the front crankshaft seal. Nothing too much to worry about. So while you're changing oil, if you've gone through the trouble to jack the car up and everything, it's always a good idea to go ahead and just give it a once over and just inspect everything under the car that you can. Don't have to take anything apart or anything. And just to make sure that you don't have anything creeping up on you that's going to go bad and leave you on the side of the road. So now what we'll do is we'll come over here, lift that out of the way, and we'll add some oil to this engine and start it up. I just gotta clean around this opening a little bit. I don't want any kind of dirt or debris getting in there whatsoever. This is the upper end of the engine. It's about as far away from the filter as you can get, and that dirt will get in there and circulate around and do damage before it has a chance to get caught in that filter. Alright, now we're all clean. Let me get a funnel and be right back. Okay, now I got 5 quarts of new oil in the engine and got the cap on and tight and all cleaned up and everything. And next thing I need to focus on is the inspection of the brake system while I've got the car up in the air. I've got the tires off now, and I just did the brakes in this thing not too long ago. I think 2010 is before I started making YouTube videos. That would have been a nice interesting video because I had to replace the pads and some of the hardware on here, and also the brake lines. And that's why the brake lines look so new. And incidentally, the brake lines for this car are really hard to find, but I managed to get lucky. Most brake lines have a date code on them now. This one is December 2003, so it's still fairly new. And the car doesn't get driven all that much either. So what you want to do is basically inspect for the hardness. Make sure that brake hose is nice and pliable, that it's not kinked up or anything. And when they leak, they're usually going to leak around these high stress areas. And I don't know if you can see the other end of it right there. Looks like we're all nice and dry. And of course you want to inspect your rotor. I don't have a pair of calipers, but you just want to basically inspect the condition of the rotor and see if you got any kind of ridge on the outside of it where it doesn't wear at all. There's hardly any difference of material there, so I know that the rotors aren't wearing all that much. Brake pads are fairly new. They're the Raybestos professional grade brake pads. And we've got plenty of meat on the outside pad. And I'm going to try to show you the inside pad. I don't know how much luck I'm going to have. There's a hole in the caliper you can inspect. Oh, there it is. You got plenty of meat on the inside pad as well too. And these are the sliding calipers. They're actually fairly loose, but they will slide around and tighten up when you apply the brakes. And of course you want to inspect your upper and lower ball joint dust boots, and they look fairly good for a 41-year-old car. And this car is a neat design. It's got the front disc brakes, which for a car of 1972 is actually, disc brakes were still fairly new back then. The brake calipers were made by a company called Kelsey Hayes. Another company that makes brakes is Bendix. And this dust shield actually has a vent. It's in two pieces. Here's the first piece and there's the second piece. And it actually routes air through here to cool the front brakes, which I think is a really good design. That's pretty impressive. And of course the brake rotor is very beefy, very thick. You can almost get your whole finger in there. And so now we'll come to the other side and do the same thing, because brakes can sometimes wear unevenly. So we'll sort of see how much wear we have on our rotors. A little bit more wear there, but the rotor is in good shape, nice and shiny. And our brake pad's got plenty of meat on it, on the outside pad. And plenty of meat on the inside pad too. I don't know if you guys can tell. Upper ball joint looks okay, even has some grease coming out of it. As well as the lower ball joint, that dust boot is nice and plump with grease. That's what you want. And some of you guys might remember this. It still has the old Atlas shocks on here. There was a company way back in the 70s and 80s called Atlas that made replacement parts. So it still has shocks that are probably from, I don't know, mid 70s to early 80s on here. They were replaced at one point. And then we have our other brake line here. Nice and supple. Nice and dry, no leaks. And same thing down there. Brakes are just not something you want to toy around with. You want to be able to stop the car. And one of the reasons why I'm doing this, A, it's a good idea, and B, if you have a classic car, at least in the state that I live in, you do not have to get it inspected every year like a new car. So you kind of have to do that on your own. And now that we have the tires off, we can check for uneven tire wear, which I can't see any. Here's your wear indicators, these bumps, where you see these ridges. Still plenty of meat. And we'll hop on over to the other side. Check for uneven wear there as well. And it looks like we're looking pretty good. I got a little bit of wear on the inside there. But compared to the wear indicator on the tire, got plenty of tread left on there. And while I've got this car up in the air, as well as the Crown Victoria, which is a very closely related car to the 72 Lincoln, I thought it'd be a kind of neat to sort of go over some of the technology that we have for the talk about the 23 years difference in these two cars. Both cars are a body-on-frame car. So here's the frame, And obviously here's the body, but it's basically got rubber isolators that the body sits on, and just sits right on top of this frame right here. And the suspension system is a upper and lower control arm coil spring suspension with a front anti-sway bar, upper and lower ball joints, and here's your steering knuckle. And like many cars of the 70s, it has these strut rods right here that go to the front of the car with rubber isolators. Here's more of the frame. Very beefy frame. You can see how thick that is. This is a very heavy car. You'll know when you go to jack one of these things up. There's more detail into the frame thickness. Very, very heavy duty frame. So there's your coil spring, and your shock absorber is in the middle of the spring, mounted to your lower control arm. And your control arm is mounted on this end to the cross member. So it's a very typical setup from cars of that era. A lot of the GM cars are made the same way. The purpose of this front strut here is to locate the lower control arm to keep the control arm from going back and forth, or front and back. It's supposed to go up and down, but that's basically about it, not front and back. So kind of a typical body on frame car. Here's your radiator cradle. And of course your bumper, which is also quite thick. It's actually a dual bumper. You got this support here coming off the frame, and then this chrome piece here. You can tell why these cars are so heavy. And then we'll come over to the Crown Victoria, and you've got a very similar setup here. You've got a body. Here's your frame, body on frame construction, and you've got your upper control arm as well as your lower control arm, and a much beefier, thicker anti-sway bar, and your steering knuckle, your upper ball joint, which I can tell has been replaced because it has a Zerk fitting on there. The original Ford parts do not. And you got your lower ball joint down there. One of the things that's missing, besides the whole front end, which I'll make a video about this car a little bit later. This is the one that I'm trying to get on the road. You don't have the strut rod connected to the lower control arm going to the front like on the Lincoln. You basically have a much larger lower control arm, significantly larger than what you have on the Lincoln. And then of course, just like a Lincoln, this side's attached to the cross member that goes across to the other side, and then you've got your coil spring and shock absorber in the middle. So then there's your lower ball joint, no Zerk fitting, so that's original. So I just thought it'd be kind of neat to kind of compare the technologies. Unlike the Lincoln, the dust shield does not have a vent. It's just basically placed farther away from the rotor. Rotor is a little bit smaller, but this is a much lighter car compared to the Lincoln. Even though by today's standards, the Crown Victoria is considered a large car, but compared to the Lincoln, it's really not. And then unlike the Lincoln, you still have the 5-mile-an-hour crash bumpers. So this Crown Victoria has a plastic bumper, which I took off, but the actual meat of it is aluminum. It's very strong. I can tell it's been in a slight accident because this has been pushed back some and it came back out, but these little shock absorbers absorb the initial crash energy and allow the bumper to come back out. And they're attached directly to the frame. And you can see here, that's one of your body mounts. Rubber body mounts that attach to this frame perch. Lincoln is made the same way. And here's the radiator cradle, which I've got loose. So I thought it'd be kind of neat to kind of compare the two cars. There's 23 years worth of difference. But they're actually very, very much alike. Basic body-on-frame construction. The Lincoln, of course, has a huge big block 460 carbureted V8 with a 4-barrel carburetor. And the Crown Vic has the 4.6 fuel-injected V8. Both engines produce about the same amount of power. This produces a little bit more power than the 4.6 does. This is running around 224 horsepower. The 4.6 in standard trim is 210. And this is producing a lot more torque than the 4.6 is. But it's just interesting to go over some of the differences over the years and also similarities. These cars are actually more similar than they are different. So I'm going to go ahead and put the front tires back on, and I'm going to see if I can get the rear tires off and inspect the brake shoes back there. Okay, now that I got the front end all down on the ground and everything and got the tires on, I still have to tighten the lug nuts, but they're usually easier to tighten when the tire's on the ground so it doesn't turn on you. Now I got the ass end jacked up in the air, and this car has the fender skirts. I thought I wanted to show you guys in case you have a car with skirts. Oldsmobile Delta 98 or 88 of 1976, I think, is an example of a GM car that would have fender skirts. I've got one pulled off on the passenger side, and that's what they look like. This lever is in the locked position. If it were on the car, it kind of pinches the fender skirt up against the body of the car like that, where my finger is. And what you want to do is push inward on this and then turn it downward to release the fender skirt. And another trick that you'll see is it's usually easier to let the rear suspension on these things hang down in full rebound by jacking up the car on the frame here instead of having the jack stands under the rear axle, because even with the fender skirt removed, the top of that tire is going to be real hard to get off once the tire is moved more upward if it were sitting on the jack stands. So I've learned over the years it's just easier to give yourself more clearance by letting the suspension be in rebound. So now we'll go through that process of getting that fender skirt off and getting the tire off. So your locking mechanism is just right here. You kind of want to grab both extremes. Might take a little persuasion here and there. Get it to the 90-degree position and just go ahead and lower it down. Get this out of the way. And we'll get our hubcap off next. I got this screwdriver that's been messed up. The tip of it came off. So it actually makes a nice blunt edge. Let me find a high spot here. One of the things I see a lot of shops doing is they'll let the hubcap come crashing down on the front of the hubcap and get all scratched up. That's another good reason not to let them do that. And because I wasn't thinking ahead of time, I didn't loosen these lug nuts with the tire on the ground. I'll have to go ahead and use my impact wrench. It's a 3/4 inch socket. And now we'll go ahead and see if we can get this drum off of here. One of the first things you want to do is make sure it's easy to turn. It's not binding up or anything. And thank goodness it's not frozen to the axle, which is nice. It's just a little sticky. We'll shake it out. Let some of that brake dust out of there. And that's pretty much the procedure. The word of the day with this car is big. That's just the only way to describe it. Even the drums are big. Huge drums, actually. It's approaching the size of the drums on the F250. And now we can see what the brake shoes look like. And I did these a while ago too, before I started making videos. But as you can see, we've got plenty of meat on these shoes. You want to inspect all around just to make sure that you don't have a problem developing where you've got uneven wear. And another thing to look out for is these wheel cylinders, which I've also replaced back in 2004. And what you want to do is look for brake fluid leaks right around this seal area, right where the piston comes out or the finger comes out, as well as the seam on both sides. These wheel cylinders after a while will always end up leaking there and contaminate the linings and give you inefficient braking. Everything is in place. The adjuster star wheel cable is in place, all the springs are in place, and I've got no leaks around the axle shaft seal like I had on the Mercedes, so we're in pretty good shape. And the axle feels pretty smooth. That's actually a large axle. Everything on this car is huge. That's a Ford 9 1/4 removable carrier axle with a double cardan U-joint feeding the pinion. And that little thing right there is the fill plug to check the gear oil. Very strong axle. So we'll go to the other side, which I've already got pulled apart. And we'll do the same thing. Check for the pad thickness or brake shoe thickness. And we're well within safe limits. Looks pretty good. All the hardware is in place. Sometimes I see these cables coming off of the cableway here laying on the ground. Everything looks good. And that wheel cylinder is nice and dry. And looks like the axle shaft seal is working good, nice and dry too. Wheel bearings feel pretty good. That clicking you hear is the spider gears inside the differential. This is not a limited slip, it's just an open differential. And that's pretty much all there is to it. There is a brake line under there, of course, which I inspected earlier. And that's right there. I replaced the brake lines on the back at the same time I did the ones on the front. No leaks around the edges. Still fairly new. And the shock absorbers are in good shape. Just a little bit of oil coming out of the shock absorbers. Nothing to be alarmed about. These are just like the ones up front. They're made by Atlas. Everything on this car is original. I mean, just except for the muffler. It's got a Midas muffler on there. But everything within reason is completely original. That's pretty much all there is to inspecting the rear. I'm going to go ahead and put the tires back on and everything, and then we'll go ahead and tighten the lug nuts, and I'll show you how I do that. Just wanted to show you guys, in case you're curious, how to get the fender skirts back on. It does have this locking mechanism, but it also has these hooks, one on each side, right there, that hook into the body of the car. One hook here, and then another hook right there. And you can see it even with the suspension in full rebound that you don't have the entire tire revealed. So it kind of wants to tuck back up under the fender there. So if you did have the jack stands underneath that rear axle, you'd play hell getting that tire off of there. So we'll go ahead and get that skirt back on. And we'll carry on with tightening down those lug nuts. So it's just like reverse of removal. We want to start one end in the hooks there, and then the other end, so we're hooked in. Gradually lift it up, and then lock it in place. Alright, now we're ready to focus on getting those lug nuts tightened. Let me get my torque wrench. This is the just a basic Craftsman clicker wrench. I like the clicker wrenches because a lot of times you can't really see what you're doing. I'm going to go ahead and adjust it up to 100 foot-pounds is where I usually like to run it at. And we'll lock that in place. And briefly while I'm doing that, or why I'm doing that, you saw me use the impact wrench to get the tire off. No problem doing that. No harm done. But when you go to tighten these things, you never want to use an impact wrench to tighten them. You'll tighten them way too tight and you could strip the lug nuts off. I've seen cases where these things are so tight on the side of the road with a regular standard tire iron, it's almost impossible to get these things off of there. I've seen them so tight that they're driven into the wheel partially. Just absurd. No reason to have that kind of torque on these lug nuts. And the other reason is that these studs are actually pressed into the back side of the rotor, which is freewheeling on this bearing. And if you have uneven torque, like you can have with a regular impact wrench, when the compressor kicks on and off, you'll have various degrees of torque. You can actually pull that rotor in the direction of the highest torque, or the bolts of the highest torque, and as that rotor heats up, it'll warp prematurely. We don't want to do that. We want to go ahead and tighten it in a cross pattern like that, and we want to have a nice even torque all the way around there on all the lug nuts. I've gotten in the habit of doing that even on the drum brakes. It's just best practice. So you just tighten it till you hear it click. You just move on to the next one. And that wheel's all done. I just go around like that, do an initial tightening, then I do it one more time just to make sure the torque is even. I'm going to go ahead and lower the car back on the ground, tighten the lug nuts, put all the hubcaps on, and go for a Sunday drive. It's been a while since I've driven this thing because I've been working so much on the Mercedes and now the Crown Victoria. So it's good to be able to drive this thing again and get some fun and enjoyment out of it. So I hope some of these tips were useful to you guys. They're not really strictly related to a older car like that. They're good tips for almost any car, how to change the oil and do a basic brake inspection, and just an overall inspection of your car before you go down to the inspection station and get a rejection sticker. I'm going to go ahead and check all the exterior lights and windshield wipers and all that kind of stuff and basically call it a day.